We love strong people, don't we? We're obsessed with them. We throw a parade for the woman who's back at her desk on Monday morning after a life-shattering loss. We look at the man who's training for a marathon while his world is falling apart and we say, wow, look at him. He's not letting it get to him. Isn't he brave? Isn't he just incredible?
Mhm. We call it resilience. We call it handling it like a pro. But what if the strength we're so busy admiring is actually just a disappearance act? What if what we're really applauding is someone's terrifying ability to shut down?
Because there's one thing we keep coming back to in our conversations, almost against our will, and that is numbing. Why are we so desperate to numb the pain?
And the question that's even harder to face is numbing actually a form of survival, or is it just a slow way of losing ourselves?
As always, we didn't just want to speak from our own experience. We wanted to understand what the research actually says.
So we did try to read up and research this very topic.
We looked at psychological studies on coping, trauma research, and data from the WHO. We looked at everything from PTSD and addiction to how people return to work after a tragedy.
And we also leaned a bit on your background and everything you've gone through.
Right. What I've seen and learned from that. And of course, what we've both seen in our real lives in general with friends and people we know also.
Hmm. Because that's the thing. Statistics are helpful for structure, but this topic, it isn't abstract, it's deeply personal.
And honestly, some of what we found out was a bit surprising.
It was. Because I always thought that numbing was just trying to forget the pain or forget what happened, and that it was unhealthy. That's what I thought automatically when you hear the word.
Yeah, me too. In this context, though, I must say I felt how helpful it can be to a certain point. And some of the research we found also said that short term avoidance can actually stabilize your nervous system. So it can literally help you survive the initial shock.
Yeah, but long term, though, that's where it get complicated, right?
Yeah, it does. So today we're not here to give a clinical lecture, and we're definitely not judging how anyone chooses to cope.
No, no. We are just here to explore and to see it from both angles because there are different ways of dealing with this. And you, Nina, who consciously chose not to numb with alcohol or medication, like sleeping pills, for instance, even though you had a very hard time sleeping during your deepest grief, then you decided that you still had other ways of numbing that worked better for you, but maybe not always in the best way, we can say too.
Definitely, we can say that. And then we have you, my sister, the observer and the one who reflects a lot.
Mm-hmm.
You will ask questions maybe people might be sitting with or wondering about regarding this.
Yeah, I'll definitely try. We will talk about some topics that we found interesting or topics that we have experienced and wondered about, both of us, numbing or coping mechanisms, like we said, alcohol, running, food, cleaning, maybe even, or diving into work and silence versus openness, because that's a thing also. We'll look at personality differences and even the cultural gap between Norway and the US, of course. We like to touch on that since there is quite a difference. And it's kind of logical as we live in different worlds to some extent, especially tied to our support systems.
And we'll tackle the question that's been haunting us for a while. Does there come a day when the painful thing has to be faced?
Or can some things just fade away if we distract ourselves long enough?
Is numbing actually a form of strength, or is real resilience something else entirely? And I have to say, we don't have all the answers set in stone, but we have the research, we have lived experience, and we have questions.
And maybe some of those questions are yours too, you listening to this conversation right now. Let's start simple. Why do we do it? Why do you think we numb the pain?
Well, because pain hurts. And I know that sounds almost too simple, but when you're in the middle of deep grief or trauma or hard times in general, it's physical. It's a tight chest, it's nausea, it's panic, it's confusion. It's not being able to swallow food, maybe. It's waking up at 3 a.m. with your heart racing like you've been running for miles.
Mm.
Neurologically, emotional pain lights up the same parts of the brain as physical pain. So the brain doesn't really distinguish between a broken heart and a broken bone the way we maybe think it does. So when we say this hurts, it actually does. It hurts like hell. It's the kind of pain that tempts you to run, to numb, to disappear, because staying with it is not easy.
That's really so important because I think we judge ourselves so hard. We think, why am I reacting so strongly? Shouldn't I be able to handle this?
Yeah, but your nervous system isn't waiting for your permission. It just reacts. When we're overwhelmed by loss, betrayal, or shock, the body goes into survival mode. Fight, flight, freeze, or numb. And numbing isn't a sign of weakness, it's a biological shield. I think we can say that.
Mm. So we're not being all dramatic, we're just being biological, right? That
Mm,
is a fact.
yeah. But avoiding the pain is actually a short term regulation strategy. As we said, we read up on this before recording. So in psychology, it's called experiential avoidance. And the research shows that avoiding those painful emotions reduces your distress immediately. Your cortisol drops, your breathing slows down. You can actually function to some degree. You can manage to make dinner, answer emails, and maybe even show up at work. And that's important to say here.
So in the short term, then it works.
Yeah, that's kind of the problem. It works.
Yeah.
And when I was at my lowest, I understood instantly why people drink, for instance, or take medication. Because the
Mhm.
second you distract yourself, the intensity drops just enough to survive the next hour. So it's totally understandable. And I did try to numb it away all the time because I didn't want to feel that pain. I just wanted everything to be normal again.
Yeah. I remember watching you back then. There were moments when you were so present, and then moments where it felt like that you just drifted away. And I think I could say that you do it now, even sometimes.
Yeah, I for sure did or still do. And I think that disappearing, that tiny emotional shutdown, was or is my nervous system just saying, this is too much right now. And sometimes that's okay. I mean, you need these pauses of distraction.
Yeah, I understand that. But what about in the long run, though?
And that's when it shifts. The same research that says avoidance helps in the moment also shows that staying in that state long term is linked to anxiety, depression, and also PTSD. And there are studies showing that people who consistently push their emotions down have higher rates of heart issues and inflammation, even. So the body keeps the score. It's not a punishment, it's like a memory.
It's like a true heartache, then, for sure. So, what saves us in week one might end up hurting us, say, year 1 or even year 5 then maybe?
Yeah, exactly. And that's the tension of this whole episode because numbing isn't wrong, but if it's the only strategy we have, if we never return to what hurt, it doesn't just go away, it waits.
It waits. Yeah, that's the thing. That is quite uncomfortable to think about too, I have to say, that it's just waiting for you.
Yeah, it is. So maybe the real question isn't why do we numb? It's when does our protection start becoming our prison? Can I say that?
Hmm. Can someone numb something for an entire life, you think? Just push it away, just keep pushing it away?
Well, I know some people try, and I say that without judgment. Again, I understand why you want to try to numb or distract totally. So to go back in time and look at myself and my reactions or coping mechanisms, there are things that happened earlier in my life that I very consciously chose not to deal with. I just decided this didn't happen, or maybe more honestly, this happened, but I'm not going there. So when the thoughts came up, I pushed them away. When someone asked, I minimized, I brushed it off, I made it smaller than it was. And I honestly thought that this was the best way of coping.
So when you say that, can you give us an example? Yeah. Just in general, what it looked like for you? I mean, only if you want to.
Well, the specific situation I'm thinking about now isn't something I want to share in details here, but I can describe the pattern. Um, it was something that really affected me back in the days. And instead of processing it, I decided I was fine. Like I said, I told myself it wasn't that big of a deal, that other people had it worse, that I just needed to move on. So I became very good at making it smaller than it was.
Hmm. That's okay. Of course. But then we can say that it's almost like putting it in a box and shoving it somewhere where you didn't have to look, where you don't have to find it. Try to forget about it.
Yeah. And for a long time, it worked. I mean, I built a life, I functioned, I studied and I worked and I helped others. I was strong and capable. And that's the thing. Numbing doesn't always look like falling apart. Sometimes it looks like success or resilience. I mean, it just looks like you're doing well.
That's important because we often think if someone is doing well, they're fine, but we don't really know what everyone is going through, do we?
Right. But what I've learned is that unresolved trauma doesn't just fade away, it just changes shape. And that's the thing people often miss about numbing. You think you're silencing the pain, kind of, but you're actually just moving it. There's actually a mountain of research on this, and it's often called somatization. But if you don't give the pain a voice, your body will find its own way to scream, kind of.
So it's like the pain leaks out of you in a way.
Yeah, exactly. It leaks out as physical symptoms that doctors can't always explain. You know, chronic back pain, migraines, digestive issues, or just a constant sense of exhaustion. Your mind might be numb, but your nervous system is still redlining.
Hmm. So while you're holding it all together, your body is actually falling apart.
Yeah. It's not just physical, it leaks into your life too. You become super reactive over small things, maybe, or you hit a wall of burnout, or your relationship starts to suffer because you've shut down the part of you that can actually connect. So I think we could say that it sneaks up on you. You think you're safe behind your shield, but the pressure is building, and eventually the shield breaks. And we know that about 6% of people will deal with PTSD, but so many more live with what we call subclinical trauma. It's the stuff that never gets a formal label or treatment, but it still dictates how you live and also how you love.
So it doesn't go away then?
I understand it like it transforms. And for me, it came back years later, and I was already in a vulnerable spot. And suddenly, that old stuff felt so much heavier. And looking back, I wonder if I'd dared to face this earlier, would it have been easier? And honestly, I don't know.
Hmm. Maybe you just weren't ready back then and thought that that was the best way, just to push it aside.
That's exactly it. And I want to be careful here because not everything needs to be opened up and dissected. Not at all. The brain actually has its own built in processing system. So, for most people, the intense distress naturally starts to fade within 6 to 12 months, even without therapy. And of course, it depends on the situation or the trauma, but time, safety, and just living your life, that does a lot of the work for us, or it can do.
So time does heal then, in a way, to some extent, or depending on the situation or the trauma.
The research says so, and I believe that. Not everything needs a dramatic healing journey, but some pain just doesn't settle on its own. And I think the difference is whether that pain quietly becomes a part of your story or if it sits underneath everything, unspoken, and just starts running the show in a way.
Hmm.
So, for me, avoiding it forever wasn't the answer. It cost me so much energy. It shaped choices I didn't even realize I was making. And when I finally allowed myself to open that door, it wasn't easy, of course, but it felt like such a relief, I have to say.
Hmm. So maybe it's not a question of if we can numb for a lifetime, it's whether we're willing to pay the price or whether we're ever ready to look at what we pushed away just to deal with it.
Hmm, I think that's it. Not all pain demands to be processed, but some pain will eventually demand to be seen one way or another.
So if some pain eventually asks to be seen, how do we know whether we're actually processing or numbing then? Because that's where I get confused again. Is distraction always avoidance? Is going straight back to work after losing someone numbing? Is running numbing? Is cleaning numbing? Where's the line? Where is the line here?
Yeah, such a good question because if we're honest, we all numb in some way, whether we are aware of it or not. And yeah, for me, swimming in ice cold water was a kind of numbing. It was the only time my brain went quiet, the only time the noise stopped. The grief, the thoughts, the constant pressure inside it just paused.
Do you think it was because you had to focus so hard to breathe through the ice cold water to control how your body reacted? Because I know the feeling, it's so cold.
A
And
hundred percent,
you
yeah.
can't, control your body. I felt like I was gonna, I don't know,
Die?
well, not die, but I wanted to like run out of the cold water. But you forced me to sit there
Yeah,
for at least 3 minutes. Is that what you said?
yeah,
And then it becomes better.
yeah. It's
And it
kind of
did.
like a meditation, or it became my medication at the time. I say medication, but I mean meditation.
Mm. Yeah, that is that is actually true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's kind of both. It
Hmm.
emptied my mind for a while. Like I said, it gave me a pause from all the noise. because when you dip yourself in ice cold water, the only thing you can focus on is your breathing.
That makes sense.
And the running too, of course. That was numbing in some way, pushing my body and then my mind. But when I look back and answer your question, for me, it wasn't about escaping life. It was more about getting a break from the intensity of it. So maybe the real question isn't if we numb, it's how, and maybe even more importantly, why.
Okay, so if some pain is eventually going to ask for our attention or come back to us, how do we know if we're actually processing it or if we're just staying busy? Like I said, I get so confused by this. Is distraction always avoidance? Where's the line here?
Well, that is the question. And honestly, like I said, we all do it, every single one of us, and it's not always destructive. Of course, it isn't. And numbing shows up in so many ways also. It can be alcohol or drugs. It can be social media scrolling, being busy, getting things done, even helping others. And to your examples, you asked about work, running, cleaning. And sometimes that's not about escaping life. It's about giving yourself a short break from the intensity so you can come back to your feelings later. And that's actually healthy. It's only when those behaviors become the only way you cope, when they're about avoiding, not regulating, that's when it starts to hurt you in the long run.
Okay, so it's less about what you do and more about why you're doing it and how, of course.
Exactly. And noticing that, even just a little, is already a step toward being with yourself instead of disappearing.
So numbing isn't the opposite of strength.
No, sometimes it's the only thing that gets you through the day. Psychologists talk about avoidance coping versus approach coping. Avoidance feels great right now, but it predicts a harder road later. An
Hmm.
approach means you're gradually letting the feelings in. But here's the kicker: in real life, they can look exactly the same from the outside.
That's what's so hard. How are we supposed to tell the difference? If someone runs a marathon after a loss, are they brave or just escaping? If they stay busy, are they resilient or just terrified of being alone with their thoughts?
I don't think you can always tell from the outside, and sometimes you can't even tell from the inside right away. You just do. So it's not always a conscious choice. It hardly ever is, I think, especially not when everything is raw, in the beginning. And I've asked myself about my running and my cleaning obsession. Was I processing or was I just outrunning the ghost?
Hmm.
And I think the only way I could tell was this: when I stopped moving, did the feelings flood me and drown me, or did they feel like something I was already slowly touching? If being still feels physically unbearable, like the pain is going to explode the second you sit down, that's usually a sign of avoidance. But if being still feels sad but tolerable, then whatever you're doing during the day is probably helping you regulate, not just escape.
Hmm. So it's about what happens in between, then maybe when you do pause, how you feel then
Yeah.
that matters.
Avoidance means you never actually enter the pain, and approach means you enter it, but in small, manageable doses. So I think we can say it's about building your capacity.
So maybe the question you have to ask yourself is your world slowly opening back up, or is it quietly getting smaller and smaller because there are so many things you're trying not to feel to avoid? So you just keep going.
Hmm. because the real danger of long-term numbing isn't that you cry less, it's that you start feeling less of everything. Joy, connection, curiosity, it all goes dull, and that's when survival starts to feel like a very lonely place.
Okay, let's talk about the most obvious ones, the most common ways of numbing, I think. Alcohol or medication, even drugs, the easiest things. You don't have to go out and do anything physical. You just take something
Hmm.
for the pain.
Yeah, let's focus on alcohol because that's what we looked into. And what we found out was after significant loss or trauma, alcohol consumption statistically increases. So this is quite normal. And multiple studies show that bereaved individuals have a higher risk of developing problematic drinking patterns, especially in the first 1 or 2 years. And it makes sense because alcohol dampens the nervous system, it softens the edges. But physiologically, it also disrupts sleep, increases depressive symptoms over time, and reduces emotional regulation capacity. So it feels like a relief at night can increase vulnerability the next day. And I guess we all know that. And most of us have felt that to some extent the day
Hmm.
after.
Yeah. And you made a very conscious choice not to drink during your deepest grief. Why was that? How did you think about that?
Yeah, it was just a decision I made. And
Hmm.
that was my personal choice, not a moral one, just to make that clear.
Yeah.
But I think it's because I had seen both professionally and privately what alcohol can do in grief. I've seen people get stuck there, I've seen families fracture under it.
Yeah.
And I also know myself, I don't like the feeling of being intoxicated. I don't like not being fully in control of my body or mind. So I decided I'm going to feel this sober. I just knew I had to. And that was hard, of course, not the part of choosing sobriety because that was an easy decision for me. But to go through the raw pain of grief is extremely hard. And there was definitely evenings or days where I absolutely understood why someone would want to blur the edges, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I can understand that too. Just to forget. But I do understand your decision. But did you ever feel tempted to numb in that way? I mean, even to try sleeping pills to sleep if you don't sleep?
Yeah, not really. But I felt the pull of wanting relief. Of course, I did. I think I was also scared that I would get used to it and would want to stay on it. And I don't know, that feeling was enough for me not to want it. And that's something we have to talk about without judgment, because when someone drinks in grief or takes sleeping pills to sleep, it's rarely about weakness. It's about wanting the pain to soften just for a few hours. So I guess the problem is when that becomes the only way you know how to regulate, when the
Yeah.
only time you feel okay is when you're slightly numb,
Mm.
because then you're not really teaching your nervous system that it can survive the feeling. You're teaching it that the feeling is dangerous in a way.
Yeah. And that, I must say, is very powerful and also quite heartbreaking if people feel like that's the only way.
Yeah, it is.
Hmm.
And I must say again, I understand the temptation. I truly do. Because grief is exhausting and trauma is exhausting. And being strong also in these situations is extremely exhausting. So sometimes you just want one evening off.
But we found the research is very clear here. Using alcohol to cope with the stress predicts higher rates of depression, prolonged grief, and dependency over time.
Mhm.
So it gives relief in the moment and increases vulnerability later. And I think that's something that you can have in the back of your head before you make that decision.
Mm. And I think that's the heartbreaking part because what people reach for in order to survive can quietly make survival harder.
Definitely. So maybe the question isn't, is it understandable? Because definitely it is. Maybe the question should be, what does it cost you in the long run to cope and numb using alcohol? Is it worth it?
Mm. And maybe even more gently, is there another way to soften the pain that doesn't require you to disappear from it?
Hmm. That is such a good or important question. I feel like one that I think a lot of people would be sitting with for a while.
I hope so. Because once you start looking at how you're trying to soften that pain, you start seeing it everywhere. It's not just in the bottle.
No, exactly. I can look a lot more productive than that. It can even look like health, like for you, because for a long time that was running. Let's talk about something that looked a lot more like the strength we opened with, your running, because back then you were running all the time. You were so disciplined, running almost every day, I must say, rain or shine. Every day I called you, you were always out for a run. And from the outside, you looked like a hero or someone who managed to deal with your pain in a healthy way. But I must ask, were you running towards something or were you just trying to outrun the pain?
Hmm. I have asked myself that question so many times. Was I running towards something or away from it? And look, if you look at the science, running is great. It floods your brain with all the good stuff endorphins, dopamine, serotonin. It's like a biological reset button for stress. So, on paper, it's actually perfect regulation. But mentally, it's not that simple, I guess. So, if I had used running as a way to stop thinking, to never have to sit still, to never have to feel, then yeah, it would have just been another form of numbing, I guess. A healthy looking one, but still a numbing strategy for sure.
Or was it?
For me, it was actually the opposite. Over time, I must say. In the beginning, it was an escape. But over time, when I ran, I felt everything. Something shifted. And I wasn't outrunning the grief. I was moving with it, if I can say that. I even cried while I ran. I processed. I let the thoughts come to me. So instead of shutting down my body, the movement actually forced me to open up.
Hmm. So in the beginning, then you ran to forget.
Yeah.
And then in the end, you ran to release.
Over time, it kind of shifted. Yeah.
Hmm.
And I think that's the litmus test. Some behaviors shrink your world, they make your emotional life smaller and tighter. But other things, even if they're intense, actually expand it. Running didn't hide the grief for me. It gave me the room I needed to carry it, kind of, to handle it better.
Yeah. I love that you found that way of release, if I can say that.
Hmm.
The idea that movement can actually give the pain some space to breathe instead of just suffocating it and keeping it in.
Hmm. But it's kind of a luxury, isn't it? To have the time and also the physical strength to do that. For most of us, the world doesn't wait for us to finish our run. It expects us to show up. So it's not always a thing everyone can do.
No. Which then leads us to the big question, which is work, because this is where I see people get so conflicted. Some are back at their desk, the very next day, maybe even,
Mm.
like that guy at the car dealership we talked about a few episodes back,
Mm.
while others just can't get back. Their body literally says, no, I can't.
Mm.
And the heavy part is that I feel like society actually judges both.
Yeah, we really do.
Mm.
But before we even talk about personality, we have to talk about where you live. Geography matters. In Norway, where I live, we're lucky. We have a safety net, we have a sick leave and protection that let you step back without losing your income or even your house. But if we look at the US, most people there don't have a guaranteed paid leave for grief. Sometimes you get 3 days, I read, and sometimes zero. You're back at
Mhm.
work before the funeral, even because you have to.
Yeah.
So, in that case, it's not a coping strategy, it's survival. You just
Yeah.
have to.
Mhm. Yeah, and that's crazy. I can't even personally imagine going through all that. Losing someone so important in your life, and then 3 days later, you're expected to smile at customer service somewhere or hit targets in a meeting.
Mm.
Not because you want to, but because you have to live. You have to
Mm.
pay your bills. And that feels so heavy and sad and wrong all at the same time.
Yeah, it's brutal. And it means we have to be careful when we compare
Yeah.
because what looks like strength might just be a necessity.
Yeah.
And what looks like collapsing might actually be a privilege, the privilege to actually pause.
To be able to. And that
Hmm.
is a really uncomfortable thought that it's just like that.
Yeah, it is. But interestingly, the research shows that routine can be a lifesaver. Work can give you structure, a sense of identity, and a reminder that the world is still turning. But, and this is a big but, it only works if you're supported, if your boss is understanding, if your workload is adjusted, maybe, if you're seen as a human being and not just as a resource.
Yeah, I can see that.
Hmm.
That if you have to go back to work, that people around you are kind of like helping you and understand what you're going through, that will definitely help. So it's not as black and white, I guess.
No, not at all. And for me, going back to nursing, surrounded by other people's pain, that would have been too much, or it was for me. I was already full. If I had
Mhm.
to hold space for patients and their families on top of my own grief, I think I would have just shut down completely. I needed space, and I was lucky enough to be able to take it.
And that's the thing. Your right answer was to step back. But it's so fascinating how different we actually are. And
Hmm.
again, back to the guy at the car dealership, the dad who lost his daughter, he felt like he had to go back to work right away just to do something and to
Hmm.
think about something else.
Yeah. And I have to say, his story really challenged my own perspective. He had lost his daughter just a week before I met him. I mean, 1 week. And he told us the story, and he told us that being at work, being right there on the showroom floor, was what saved him. It gave him a rhythm. And I believed him. I could see it in his eyes. He wasn't running away, he was using that structure to hold himself together. And that's why we have to stop judging from the outside. We look at someone and think we know if they're avoiding or being strong, but we don't actually know what that behavior is doing for them internally. For that salesman, work was a lifeline. For me, it would be a prison, and both are true.
Yeah, it's interesting when you say it like that. It's like we need to stop asking, is this good or bad, and start asking, what is this doing for you right now, maybe? Like, how does it feel for you?
Hmm. Is it helping you slowly re enter life, or is it the only place where you don't have to feel? And only the person standing in it can actually answer that.
So maybe instead of asking, did you go back to work too soon? We should be asking, how is it for you to be there? Or does it feel like you have enough space? Are you supported in a good way?
Mm. Because resilience doesn't always look like getting back to normal, and it doesn't always look like stepping away either. Sometimes it's just knowing what your nervous system can handle right now in this moment. That, of course, is different from person to person.
Hmm.
Mm.
It's interesting though, because society definitely rewards the strong ones, right? Like you said, if you're back at work quickly, people think that you're admirable. They bounce right back. If you don't crack, you're resilient, you're strong. But if you need time, if you can't perform, it makes people uncomfortable. Like, wow, she's still not back at work after
Yeah,
all this time.
totally. We're much more comfortable with productive grief than visible grief. Much more. If you cry quietly but still hit your deadlines, we can handle that. But if your pain interrupts the system, if you can't function, that's when people start looking away. That's uncomfortable.
Hmm. So, are we accidentally praising people for just being numb in that case?
Well, that can be the case. And I think we are, maybe without meaning to. I don't know. Maybe that's the easiest thing to do.
Hmm.
And we found some research on this emotional suppression. People who push their feelings down are often seen as more competent at work, at least in the short term. But on the inside, it's a different story. Your body is working overtime, your heart rate is up, your blood pressure is spiking, and your nervous system is on high alert. So on the outside, you look composed, but on the inside, it's a different story.
It's heartbreaking. The person who has it all together is actually the one carrying the most stress, or it can be the case. I guess we are all different in the way we handle grief, too. I remember after listening to a podcast, one you recommended actually, they touched on exactly that, how we're all so different, also when it comes to how we grieve. They talked about the practical grievers, if we can call them that, where they are maybe the ones that get over, or maybe I should say, get through grief a lot quicker than an emotional griever. So it's a practical griever and an emotional griever.
Yeah.
And the practical grievers are maybe the ones who go back to work and everyday routines quicker because, yes, someone has just passed away, but life has to go on,
Yeah.
you know?
And they, meaning practical thinkers or grievers, are
Mm.
also the ones that maybe judge people who is not over the grief yet after a year or so. Maybe thinking, wow, it's been so long. Like you said, they really should get back at it now. What are
Yeah.
they doing?
And it's funny because when I listened to that episode, I was thinking about my husband because I feel like he is so practical, or he's a practical thinker.
Hmm.
Sometimes I actually appreciate it as I'm the total opposite, over emotional and an overthinker, opposite attracts. But he can definitely calm me down if I'm upset about something. And he says, just relax, that happened. And there is nothing you can do about it now. So just move on. That is how he works. But obviously, I'm not like that. I overthink what I could have done differently. But that actually helps me. And I think it's true. If you can't do anything about it, move on and don't think about it anymore.
Yeah, that can be true. And it can be a good advice in the right situation, I have to say. It's not always appropriate. It would feel like a slap in the face for me if someone told me that after my husband passed, I have to say. That
Yeah.
happened, now get over it. I mean, so it totally depends on the context.
Yeah, for sure. He would not have said that in that context. That was just like a general of how a practical thinker thinks.
Yeah.
But they were also talking about practical grievers and how they maybe move on quicker because they think that you have to get back into your routines and maybe that's better for you. And then they move on.
Hmm.
And what kind of annoyed me after I listened to them, I was thinking about, how would my husband react if I died? And this kind of annoyed me. I know. I'm a drama queen for asking that question, but that's me. But he said, well, of course I would be sad, but I wouldn't sit there and cry in front of the kids because I feel like I would have to show them that I'm strong and that life goes on.
Yeah.
And I understand that. And I know that it's true. But I was hoping for a more romantic answer, I must say. Like, I would have been so heartbroken. I would cry myself to sleep, and life would never be the same without you in it. But I understand what he was saying, of course, to be strong for the kids and all that. But,
Yeah.
anyways, I think maybe there is a difference between men and women also. What do you think? When it
I
comes to
think
the
so.
practical, emotional grievers, maybe?
Yeah, I think so too. And therefore, we should probably talk a bit about how this plays out differently for different people. Because, yes, we are very different in the ways we meet challenges and grief. And I think there's often this unspoken expectation, especially then for men, that strength means silence and action. Historically and culturally, many men have been taught that the only acceptable way to handle distress is to do something, to work harder, to push through physically, or to just carry it alone. Many men, I mean, not all.
Right. It's that old man up mentality. And because of that, we might miss the warning signs. If a man is back at his desk or at the gym, we assume that he's fine. But statistically, we know that men carry a very high burden of silent suffering. They also have significantly higher suicide rates, for instance. And that's a conversation that we can't ignore.
Mm, true. And it's not that men are weaker or worse at feelings, not at all. It's that shield they've been giving is often very rigid.
Mm.
So if your only tool is to stay busy and stay silent, man or woman, you're carrying a massive invisible risk regarding what you said there.
Hmm. Maybe it's like the feeling of you have to be strong.
Mm.
So maybe the man who goes straight back to work and never says a word, he's the one people applaud. We say, look how well he's handling it, but we might actually be applauding his disappearance.
Precisely. We think he's back, but he might just be going deep underground. Not always, of course, but yeah, it might be a good advice to check in and ask how they're really doing. And that's maybe also why we need to redefine what resilience actually is.
Yeah. So what is it then? If it's not falling apart and it's not shutting down, what does healthy resilience look like?
Well, maybe the word is flexibility. In therapy language, they call it psychological flexibility. And that's the ability to feel the heavy, hard things without letting them run the whole show. You're not ignoring the pain, but you're not drowning in it either. And this sounds so very easy, right? But it's about being bendable, not unbreakable, because that's the core of it. Numbing is rigid, collapsing is also rigid, but flexibility, that's alive in a way. It stretches you and it's uncomfortable, but it's what keeps you present in your own life.
So maybe resilience isn't about how fast you can sprint back to your old life. Maybe it's about slowly building a new life, one that actually has room for what happened without pretending that it didn't, you know,
Yeah,
deal with
exactly.
what happened.
It's not about erasing the pain, but it's not about building your whole identity around the pain either. It's just making room for it in your way.
And then there are quieter, almost invisible forms of numbing, like cleaning, eating, or food, or just order in general. And the things that looks like housekeeping on the outside, but feels like a battle on the inside.
Yeah, because when your inner world is so chaotic, the nervous system desperately craves stability. And for many, that is stability or order. Research shows that appetite is often the first thing to go. You
Hmm.
were mentioning eating. So, appetite is often the first thing we take on. Some people overeat and some don't eat at all. And for me, I didn't eat. I felt this profound emptiness inside, and physically being empty felt right. It was like my body finally matched my soul in a way. There was a weird, dark comfort in that hollow feeling.
I remember that. We practically had to beg you to eat something. I was watching you slowly fade away for real. I don't know how to say it, but it was terrifying to watch because you looked like you were shrinking. You were just like skin and bones. When we hugged you, I could just feel all your ribs. Really sad to see, really.
Yeah, I was. And I think that's the trap. You think you're gaining control, but you're actually just shrinking your life until it's the size of a dinner plate. I don't know. But then there was the cleaning also, like you said. And I became obsessive. I would spend hours organizing drawers, scrubbing floors. But looking back, I don't think that was numbing in the same way. That was about, or more about agency. In a world that felt shattered and chaotic, I could at least make sure the socks were paired and the kitchen was clean.
Yeah. So cleaning was a way of saying, I can't fix my life, but I can fix this room. I can keep things organized or in order.
Even something as simple as folding laundry can be therapeutic. It reminds the brain that you can still do things. You're not just a victim of your circumstances. You're present. You can do stuff. So again, same behavior, different purpose. One was a way to disappear, not eating, and the other was a way to try to re-enter my world in a way by creating order.
So maybe the real question we should be asking ourselves isn't why am I cleaning or organizing or why am I not eating? Maybe the question is this making my world smaller or is it helping me stay alive inside of it?
I think that's it. If your need for control is cutting you off from people and joy, it's a shield. But if it's giving you the ground you need to stand on so you can face the grief, then it's a lifeline, I think.
So we talked about running, work, alcohol, cleaning, and even food. But what about the little things? The normal things, if I can say that. I guess in our world or these days, that's what a lot of us do. We barely sit in silence anymore. We scroll on our phones, watch Netflix, anything on TV, just to forget. Or, yeah, I guess we can say forget. Is that numbing too, you think?
Um, I wouldn't say totally because it really depends. I mean, sometimes it's just a little break. Your brain needs a pause. You're emotionally exhausted, and a few hours of distraction can help you keep functioning. And other times, or if you do it all the time, if you can't sit still without turning on the TV or scrolling endlessly instead of dealing with your problems, then yeah, it can become a way of avoiding feelings. So again, I don't think it's the behavior itself, it's how it's being used and how it affects you over time.
So context matters then and intention, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. Or I guess it is. Maybe that's the nuance people often miss because Netflix isn't evil and hobbies aren't a problem. That's not what we are saying here. But if they're the only way you cope, and I mean, then after something has happened to you, after trauma, in this very context regarding numbing, when scrolling is the main thing that keeps you from touching the harder feelings, that's when it becomes numbing. And I did this myself after my husband passed. Some nights I did not sleep at all. I just watched endless shows. And I still do some days, to be honest, to calm my mind and get my thoughts over to something else. And in general, I know a lot of people do this. I mean, without going through loss and grief and hard stuff. But for me, it was an escape at the time, and it can still be, but maybe a good one, a necessary one. I don't know, because I actually love it to just binge a TV show can be so relaxing. And I didn't and I don't replace my grief by doing this. It just gives me space to feel it later or tomorrow or, yeah.
Well, that makes
Yeah, no.
sense. To forget in the moment and focus on something else.
Mm.
And I guess hobbies can be like that too. Writing, knitting. A lot of people knit in Norway.
Mm. Yeah.
Running, baking, working out. I mean, these are all positive things that we need in our lives to make it easier, something to switch our focus, and as you say, to make us relax.
Yeah, I guess anything that keeps you alive inside, not away from life, because of course we do need hobbies. And also sometimes your brain is just fried. We also have to realize that our attention has been, I have to say, hijacked. Tech giants profit from us staying numb. They kind of want us to keep scrolling because it keeps us from wonder and reflection, because it really does.
Mm.
They want our attention and they
Yeah.
get it.
Mm. So we're not just numbing ourselves, we're being helped to stay numb in modern society too.
Yeah, I
Ugh.
think so.
Yeah.
And it's making us psychologically weaker. When we lose our capacity for reflection, we lose our ability to sit with ourselves. We're, in a way, trading our mental depth for a quick dopamine fix, and that makes our inner world feel smaller and more fragile.
So how do we fix that? How do we make that inner world bigger again?
I heard this great metaphor once. So just try to imagine you're in a tiny, cramped room and there's a wasp inside with you. What's your first instinct?
Well, to kill it because I don't want it to sting me, that it's too close to me and I would be scared.
Right? Because the room is so small, the wasp is all you can focus on. And that's what happens when we have a small mental space. Every problem, every pain feels like that wasp. We try to numb it or remove it because we can't function and breathe with it there.
Hmm. What if the room was bigger though?
Yeah, there you go. Point exactly. Imagine you're in a huge, I don't know, ballroom with that same wasp. It's still
Mhm.
there. It might still be annoying, but you don't have to remove it to stay sane. You have space to breathe, to move, to exist with the wasp. So, expanding your mental room is what psychological flexibility is all about. It's not
Hmm.
about deleting the pain, it's about making your room so big that the pain doesn't overwhelm you anymore. So, you're becoming friends with all your feelings, even the ones that sting.
That is such a great way of seeing it or try to understand it. I actually love that.
Yeah, me too.
So small numbing behaviors like Netflix, scrolling, hobbies, they can be helpful if they give space for a little time, but then they become harmful if they're the only strategy you have, if that's the only thing you do.
Yeah. And the key is, again, noticing, not judging, but asking, is this helping me move through it or away from it? Your hard stuff, then. I
Hmm.
mean,
Yeah, I like that. But also, I must say, slightly complicated because life is messy at times. And I get that we need the numbing from time to time.
yeah, life is messy from time to time, and that's okay. Uh, Small pauses, little distractions, they're human. They're part of living, and sometimes they're exactly what allows us to face the harder feelings later.
So maybe numbing isn't bad. It's only bad if it becomes the only tool that we have.
Yeah, and I think that's what people need to hear also. Compassion, not judgment. Permission to take a pause as long as you're still moving forward, even slowly.
Okay, over to relationship and support. Who can help and how?
I actually think step one, before we even talk about support, is this. You have to dare to be honest and open with at least one person you trust. Not everyone, not the whole world, but someone. Because if you never let anyone see what's really going on inside of you, that's when you'll end up numbing alone.
That's true. You can't really receive support if you're not showing anything.
Exactly. And that's the vulnerable part. Because opening up means risking that they won't understand or won't respond the way you hoped. But without that risk, there is no real connection, just coping in isolation. And sometimes that risk is exactly why we don't open up. It can actually feel safer to just handle it yourself.
That makes sense. Because if you've ever tried to open up and it didn't land well, they don't respond well or ignore you, you remember that. And then the next time it's easier to just think, I'll deal with it on my own. But I also feel like this is where it gets complicated though, because you can numb alone, you can process alone, but other people are usually still involved.
Hmm.
And sometimes they help and sometimes they don't.
Yeah, and that's actually very connected to numbing because sometimes we don't avoid feelings on our own. We avoid them together, or, I mean, other people can accidentally help us avoid them.
What do you mean?
Well, support isn't just about someone being there, it's about whether their presence makes it safer to feel or safer to shut down. And that is a big difference.
So it's not like I'm here, so now everything will be okay.
No, I wish it worked like that. And this is something I had to learn, maybe the hard way, I don't know. Because when things were hardest for me, I didn't, and I don't need people to hug me and stroke me and cry with me and tell me how terrible everything was or is still. That
Which is
actually,
maybe a natural reaction for people to do. Like, come here, let me embrace you.
yeah, but
Mm.
that actually makes it heavier for me.
Yeah,
Um, you know me.
I
But
do.
back then, I sometimes felt like I ended up comforting them instead. And that is exhausting because
Yeah.
there is this idea that you're saying here that grieving means collapsing, being helpless, the need for being held. But for me, that wasn't what helped. What helped was calm presence, someone who didn't dramatize it, someone who didn't need me to be broken in a certain way, in a way they could handle. I just needed someone steady.
Mhm. That's interesting because I think a lot of people think comfort equals emotion, tears, physical closeness, big empathy, hugs, strokes, like you said. And
Hmm.
yeah.
Yeah, and for some people, that's exactly what they need. But for others, like me,
Mhm.
that kind of intensity can actually push you further into numbness because if the room gets too emotional, your system just shuts down. It protects you, and then you're not processing. You're just managing the situation, kind of, or managing the other person.
Yeah. So for you or for anyone, the wrong kind of support can actually increase avoidance.
Yeah, because if I feel like I have to stabilize someone else in my grief or in my problem, I move into functioning mode immediately. And functioning mode looks strong, but it can also be a form of numbing. So for me, the right support wasn't dramatic, it was steady. It allowed me to feel without performing my grief.
So sometimes you just manage it alone.
Sometimes, yeah. And sometimes that is enough for me. Sometimes that's what my nervous system can or could handle. And
Mm.
I often need to process the hardest parts alone first. That's just how I'm wired. But that doesn't mean I didn't or that I don't need people. It just means that I need the right kind of presence.
Yeah. And you were good at communicating that, I feel like. So then at least people knew that they didn't have to hold you tight.
Yeah, that was kind of essential for me.
Mhm. Doesn't matter who it is, though.
Yeah, of course, very much. I mean, some people make it easier to stay with your feelings, others make it easier to escape them. It's subtle, but you can feel it. The right person helps you lean into the discomfort in small, manageable doses. And the wrong person, even with good intentions, I have to say, can push you into over functioning, shutting down, or performing strength. And then you're back to numbing again.
Hmm. So it's not just about talking, it's about whether you feel safe enough to not disappear or perform.
Yeah. And that's why support is so complex. It's not about how many people you are surrounded by, it's about whether you feel understood. And actual support isn't enough if it doesn't feel safe. And I think flexibility applies here too. You're allowed to step back, you're allowed to handle some things alone, but you also need to be able to let someone in when it feels right because healing isn't just solitary, it's relational. It's the world letting you exist without demanding that you collapse or perform or disappear.
It sounds simple, or maybe not, but it's actually incredibly delicate.
Yeah, it is. And it takes time to learn what kind of support that helps you feel and what kind of support that pushes you into hiding.
Maybe that's the work, not finding perfect support, but noticing when you're still yourself in the room and when you're slowly disappearing. If someone is listening right now and recognizing themselves in this, maybe in the scrolling, the overthinking, the whine, the running, what do they actually do? What do you think? It can be quite overwhelming to suddenly realize, oh, I'm not processing this, I'm numbing.
Yeah, sure. I think the first thing is don't panic. And remember, numbing is not a moral failure. It's a nervous system strategy. It's your body trying to protect you.
So, not I need to fix myself, more like, oh, that is interesting.
Yeah. Curiosity instead of criticism. Ask yourself that question we've circled around today. Is this helping me move through it or away from it? And as I'm saying this, I realize it's exactly what Janne told us. You remember? And for our listeners, that's the cognitive therapist from a few episodes back. Curiosity instead of criticism.
Yeah, that's it. It's funny how it all connects back to those cognitive tools. It's about looking at your own patterns without the judgment. And if the honest answer is away from it, that doesn't mean that you have to change everything by tomorrow, right? You have time.
Yeah, it might just mean sitting with a feeling for 5 minutes longer than usual, or telling one safe person a tiny bit more than you normally would, and maybe skip that second glass of wine or take a walk without your headphones. Just small experiments.
That feels manageable, I must say. Not
Mhm.
a personality change, it's just small little shifts.
Because healing, if we even want to use that word, rarely happens in dramatic breakthroughs. It happens in these tiny moments where you choose not to disappear, to not numb. And I also want to say this sometimes numbing a little is what allows you to keep going, and that's okay too. The goal isn't to feel everything all the time. The goal is flexibility, to have more than just one way to cope.
I like that. Having options. And I guess one of the most important options, maybe the bravest one, if you recognize yourself in what we've been talking about here today, is actually reaching out for help, maybe also professional help, whether it's a therapist, a doctor, or just being completely honest with the people that you trust. It's not a sign of weakness to say, I can't carry this burden alone anymore. And I feel like if someone came to you and said they had something they wanted to share, most people would be open to sit down and listen.
Absolutely. Seeking support is an act of courage. It's a way of saying, I'm worth the effort of finding a way back. You don't have to navigate this by yourself because life will hurt you again. That's not being pessimistic, it's just the truth. And if we only have one strategy, if we only know how to shut down or overfunction, we become fragile. And there's actually so much learning in suffering and pain. You just have to be aware of it to be able to think and reflect and feel. So if we can do that, feel and rest and distract and connect and work and pause, then we aren't rigid. We're living and coping in the best way for yourself, for us.
And maybe that's the real takeaway here. Not don't numb, but don't disappear from yourself.
Yeah. Stay with yourself, even when it's uncomfortable, especially then. And I will leave you with this gentle reminder from my all time favorite writer, Bianca Sparacino. You can be both a masterpiece and a work in progress at the same time.
You can do it. Perfect ending.
Nina had a dream, all black and white. We were talking in English, yeah, that ain't right. Two Norwegian sisters miles apart, but that dream lit a fire, put a mic to the heart. Katrine's in the States, Nina's back home. Two voices, one mission through the microphone. Grief in life, the highs and the lows. We hit record, uh-oh, where the file go? Oh, we fumble, we stumble, but baby we shine. Lost the intro, never mind. Why Wi-Fi, shaky cables cross, but our hearts stay strong, no moment lost. From a dream to the mic, now the world can hear. Two sisters telling truths with a laugh and a tear. We live, we learn, we sip, we sigh. Talking love, talking lost, let the echoes fly. Grief walks in, pulls up a chair, says I'll stay a while, yeah, life ain't fair. But we mix it with laughter, a toast in hand, finding light where the dark still stands. Ba-da-da-boo-doo, is this thing on? Mic's on mute, oh well, move along. Ba-ba-dee, ba-ba-da, take two. Oops, too late, let's laugh it through. From a dream to the mic, now the world can hear. Two sisters telling truths with a laugh and a tear. We live, we learn, we sip, we sigh. Talking love, talking lost, let the echoes fly. So plug in, lean in, let's take our time. No script, no filters, just rhythm and rhyme. We're here, we're now, we're in our prime. Two sisters, one dream, on the mic.